Hi, my name's Mike DeLong. I'm the pastor of the Vine Church. And if you are listening to this podcast or watching this video presentation, this is our special series on race. At the Vine, we believe that the answer to our current situation is not to draw our battle lines, retreat to our corners, and not say anything to each other at all out of fear of saying the wrong thing. We believe that the answer to our current situation is to actually lean in. It's to have the discussion. It's to actually work through the differences in worldviews. It's to talk it out. Now look, when we do that, it's going to be messy. I mean, really messy in places. So as you consume this series, which has one-on-one interviews and panel discussions, you'll have to remember to be grace-filled yourself. For there will be messy moments where you will be offended. Because you see, here at the Vine, we have a pretty multicultural congregation. We have many different people from many different backgrounds. It's just a matter of time until I say something or somebody says something that offends you. We live in a culture that's cancel culture based. Anytime we don't hear what we like or don't hear what we value, there's this temptation just to shut it down, cancel it. I'm going to ask you to suspend that for a moment. Offer grace to all that speak in this particular series. And as we work through this together, let's pray collectively that the Spirit of God would open our minds to the worldview of the other, give us perspective and mercy for the other, and that as we move together as a community, we may not fix the world, but we may become a shining example of how we overcome the differences in worldview through these discussions. This is our intent. Now, here's the deal. I can't control how you're going to react to this. The Bible clearly says in Romans chapter 12, it says, do everything within your power to live at peace. As far as it depends on you, do everything to live at peace. Which means know my heart and know the hearts of those who've participated. We want to promote unity. We want to promote clarity and a biblical worldview. There will be moments when in our brokenness, in our inability to communicate effectively, we'll say things off the cuff that will not be exactly what we hold to be true. But I can't control your reaction. I can only ask you to be mindful, thoughtful, prayerful, and grace-filled as we work through this together. All right, proceed. Love you. Mean it. Okay, this is Mike, and I'm back with my buddy Darryl. This is welcome back to Pewology if you're watching this on line, Facebook, YouTube, or if you're listening to this on our podcast. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Darryl is the Now, are you in Apopka?
I'm in Orlando.
Orlando. Okay.
Yeah.
I keep thinking. Why do I keep thinking Apopka? Did you move to Apopka?
I used to live in Apopka, then I moved to Kissimmee, and that's when I ran into you.
Okay.
When I moved here several years ago. Yeah.
Okay. And you are pastoring a church.
Mm-hmm. Pastor of Upside Church in Orlando.
I love it. All right. So this is pastor to pastor. We're going to have some discussions on just race and all the thing that's going on in our world right now. Here's my thinking. I think you're going to agree with this. My thinking is there's this big temptation right now with all of the emotion and all of the pent-up frustration that has literally just boiled over. There's this real temptation to say, don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk. Be quiet. Everybody go to their corners. You know what I'm saying? And I'm one of these people. I could be wrong.
Right.
But I'm one of these people that's like, I think we need to lean in.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is the exact time to have the conversations and have the talks, to be passionate, to be direct, to listen? Like, I think that's the time.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. This is the time to engage in the conversation that has been needed hundreds of years ago, really. And I love what I see, unfortunately, with the unfortunate events that have unfolded over the last 4 weeks, actually 30, 40 days, you know, and it's reached a point where people are really beginning to understand and see some of the pain and some of the undercurrent that Black America's been talking about.
Right.
And I love, I mean, you can't go anywhere in Orlando and not see people of a different color holding up signs saying Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And because what that tells me is that when they saw Ahmaud Arbery, and we're not talking about his character, we're not talking about whether or not he was doing something suspicious or any of that.
Got it.
We're talking about the inhumanity that was displayed, you know, that we've seen over the last 40 days, and we're talking about George Floyd. And I to this day, I cannot watch the video.
That was one of my first questions. Have you watched it?
I cannot watch.
You've seen clips.
I've seen snippets of it. I've seen enough to see what took place, and I read the article of what happened. Yeah, but I cannot watch the video.
I watched it. It was hard.
Yeah,
it was brutal.
Yeah. And I think, and it's, so my point that I was going to say is the reason why I believe that I see signs held up by people that I haven't seen hold up those signs before is because they saw themselves in George Floyd.
Okay.
I think they saw the inhumanity, the indecency. They saw this. It was so egregious that it hit home with them. Yeah. That, you know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, probably have been articulated for the last, you know, since civil rights, since Jim Crow, they've seen it. Okay, man, we got to do something.
Yeah, on video, up close, no argument. There will be discussions of mitigating circumstances, but nothing will mitigate what we saw.
No.
I mean, nothing.
No.
There will be no, in this particular situation, in my opinion, there will be no legal maneuvering that will undo what people have seen here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a scripture in the Bible that says that if you call the wicked just, that the people will abhor you. The people will abhor you, and nations will abhor you. So America used to be sort of the moral compass. You know, the United Nations, they're able to sort of go in and say, hey, human rights for people and things of that nature. Well, man, you really fell off that moral horse in this incident. And if you get it wrong, what is that going to mean for you in terms of foreign affairs? What is it going to mean even in this country? Because it seems that, you know, we see anarchy, and it's troubled me so much that
talk to me about that. What do you think about the aftermath of this? What do you think about the outflow of this thing?
So for me, I have a biblical view of events. So when I process things, I'm processing it through a biblical lens. Okay. So I have a biblical view versus a world view. Right. And so it's a tremendous benefit to have a biblical view. Okay. Because this is to be expected in a fallen world.
Okay. So hold on. Let's go slow. Because I want to make sure I'm understanding this, and I want to make sure everybody listening is understanding this. Sin doesn't surprise you.
Sin doesn't surprise me. Okay. Sin doesn't surprise me, and I've stated this in several sermons over the last couple of weeks that we don't have a race problem in this country. We don't have a socioeconomic problem in this country. We don't have a political problem in this country. Those are all symptoms. So my analogy that I use is like if you're sneezing or you're coughing, I'm not going to say you have a cough. I'm not going to say you have a sneeze. I'm not going to say you have a runny nose, you know, when I'm diagnosing you. Yeah. I'm going to say you have a cold or you have the flu because that's the proper diagnosis. That's the virus that's causing these symptoms. Yeah. unfortunately, in our society, because people have a worldview, they tend to focus on the symptoms. And so we have to engage in conversations regarding those symptoms.
Yeah.
But people like you and I, when we engage in those conversations, we have to challenge their worldview and sort of elevate them to a higher plateau where they're able to see the larger narrative that's causing these things. Yeah. Because the Bible says in Psalms 51:5 that we're born in sin and shapen in iniquity. Mm-hmm. And in Jeremiah 17:9 says the heart is deceptively wicked. Who can know it? So my own heart deceives me. Yeah. When you read the Bible basically says that we're all thugs.
I like
the Bible. The Bible basically says that we're all thugs.
Yeah. You're kidding yourself if you think you're more elite or better than anyone.
Absolutely.
Whether that's a person or a race or a group or a nationality, whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, a study of Genesis, the first, you see one of the first acts after sin entered into the equation. You see a brother murder his brother.
Yeah. Doesn't take long.
It doesn't take long. And this is what sin does.
Right.
This is what sin does. And sin creates race problems. Sin creates these dynamics that we're caught in, these socioeconomic dynamics, the disparity, all of the things that we articulate very well,
right? But
we don't really move it to the larger narrative, to the cause.
So so look at it from my perspective and some of the challenges that I have here, and then I want to hear how you're putting this into words to your congregants, to the people that you're talking to how you're preaching on this. So for me, I got to be very careful.
I understand your carefulness.
Are you
yes,
with
sir?
me? Because here's the deal, right? I 100% agree with you. I think that there's an underlying evil, sin, sickness, brokenness that undergirds all these problems.
Yes.
And I think potentially talking only about the race issue is limiting the discussion too much, that we have to get to the deeper stuff. But for a white guy to say that,
right, that could be risky.
That's a risk.
That could be
then
risky.
It's like, hey, you're trying to change the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
So how are you navigating that? How are you, like, what are the ways, or have you started conversations, or how are you getting people to go, okay, yeah, there is something more that deeper than just race. Not that race and racism doesn't exist.
Right.
But how do you get them to look deeper?
So a couple of things that I do with my students that I taught at the AME church when I was there.
Okay.
When you look into the Bible and you read about the unfaithfulness of Israel, when you read about Samson and his maladies, when you read these narratives, you're in the story.
Yeah.
When you read history, you're looking into the mirror of your own soul.
Right.
And I have them to process that. And I say, what does that mean? What am I saying to you when I say when you read history, you're looking into the mirror of your own soul?
Okay.
You're very capable of doing the very acts that repulse you.
Okay.
You're very capable of doing that.
Yeah, I like that.
Psychologists have done studies, and they have come to the conclusion that all selves wants to be the tyrant of others' selves.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the divorce rate is out of control, because we want everything to orbit around us and everything to be subservient to us. And that's so it's these maladies that I tend to focus on. And then when they start talking about race issues, I basically say, well, look, transatlantic slave trade, of course, we know that was an egregious system. All right. But it didn't start with Europe. It started with the African kings.
Okay.
It started with the African kings. Number one, there were intertribal conflicts.
Okay.
And the unbelievable, ungodly, inhumane acts that they performed against each other, I won't even entertain on this podcast. It's unbelievable.
Right.
It was so bad that the African kings selling those tribes that they had enslaved to the Europeans, those slaves.
That was an upgrade.
That was an upgrade.
Wow.
That was an upgrade. That was an upgrade.
Wow.
They were at least allowed to live because they were going to be butchered and slaughtered and offered to their false gods.
Wow.
So when you study these different societies, you look at Africa and you study the intertribal conflicts, and they're still having intertribal conflicts. In 1994, under Clinton, you had the Rwanda genocide, where the Hutus and the Tutsis, that. There was over 1 million people.
Hotel Rwanda.
Yeah, Hotel Rwanda, exactly. There was over 1 million people that died in that. Wow. Now, that's not just a black thing. You go into Croatia, there was genocide over there.
Absolutely, I remember that.
Okay. You look at Stalin.
Yeah.
You look at Hitler.
Yeah. We've been doing this. It doesn't matter the race. We've been doing this for a long time.
Bro. Whether it's black or white, it's the same problem. It's sin that undermines. Sin is undermining our democracy. Yeah. Whether you want to call it socialism and communism. Now, don't get me wrong. Democracy is the best ideological system that mirrors the virtues and the characteristics that God engenders. Yeah. But
it ain't perfect.
It ain't perfect. And the reason why it's not perfect, because anytime you put man into a utopia, that utopia,
we're going to screw it up.
We're going to screw it up.
We're going to screw it up. We're going to break it.
We're going to break it, bro.
Yeah, that's it.
Romans 9, the 9th chapter, the 28th verse and the 29th verse. It talks about that God is going to do a quick work on the earth, but it makes a profound statement in verse 29. It says that except God left a seed in that particular society, that nation was going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so when we process that scripture, we're doomed if God doesn't crash in us. Yeah. We're doomed if the gospel is not propagated in our society, because there has to be a seed of love, a seed of light, and a seed of life that only comes from and is emanated from God that preserves our society.
And I think, I think that we could, if we turn this into a Bible study, I think we would agree that the outworking of that at some level should be the church.
Yes.
That the church is the preserving, as Jesus would say, the salt and the light, the preserving factor in a decaying culture.
Yes.
Which means that's why I'm saying right now, we should be leading on this.
Brother, you're preach. That's music to my ears, because that's what I've been saying. Yeah. We should be controlling the narrative.
Yeah. But we're not.
We're not.
No, we're getting killed on the narrative.
We're not. And I applaud you for inviting me in and having this discussion, because let me tell you something. We're all tied in a web of mutuality. Yeah. I need you, and you need me. Yeah. And when I say I need you to sponsor me. Yeah. And I have to sponsor you. So that conversation that you want to have, I have to sponsor you. Yeah. So you can have that conversation. Yeah. So
I need you to put your stamp on it.
Yes, bro. Yes. So that you're not out there by yourself and people are saying, oh, no, here's another white guy who's insensitive and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But no, if I'm sponsoring you, that brings a new dynamic to the picture. And it says, no, well, we need to listen to this guy. Yeah. Because I'm sponsoring you. And I need you to sponsor me by having the conversation to the power structure that's been ignoring us for all this time. Yeah. So, you should encourage other pastors who just happen to be in white skin, because I hate talking about this.
Yeah, I know.
I hate talking about color because it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
But the reality is that you definitely have a lot more leverage than I do. Right. And so I need for you to sponsor this conversation that must be had. Yeah. And then I need to sponsor you so that you can have that conversation.
I agree.
You see?
I agree.
So we need each other.
We got to model it.
We got to model it.
We got to model it for the congregations.
Yes.
We got to model it for people. We got to model it for people of all different races.
Yeah.
If we can't sit down and have a conversation, how is anybody else?
How is anybody else going to have it?
Come on.
And we're going to judge angels one day. The Bible says we're going to judge angels one day. We're going to judge the world one day. And it's like, if we can't have that, sit down and have a conversation, I think God is going to have to probably go on Indeed and probably get some more resumes out there and get rid of this whole group of.
Oh, man. All right. So let's start with the complicated. From your perspective, the Floyd thing feels like the straw that broke the camel's back. This murder feels like a turning point. Maybe that's just because of the media coverage. Maybe that's just because of the social media uproar. Maybe it's because of the protests. I don't know. But this feels different a little bit. to me.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, and I know you can't fix it all in one conversation or one comment, but has something stuck out to you in this that you're like, if we changed this, we need to address this? Like, what is it? I in the protest, I see the emotional overflow.
Yeah.
I've yet to really sense the coherent list of changes that need to take place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I hear, we got a problem.
Right.
I don't hear exactly what the answer is to the problem yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So from your perspective, this is not new to you. You're not sitting around going, oh, I'm surprised this happened, right? Like, obviously, there's a context to this for you. What do you think when you see this and the dam breaks and you go, we need to be doing this?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said earlier, that the church needs to be heading up this protest.
Okay.
We need to be in charge of the narrative. And how do we do that? I think it's time for, pastors who have a platform to challenge bigotry in their congregation, to challenge marginalization in their congregation. It was probably several years ago, maybe about 10, 12 years ago, that our church was trying to partner with a bigger church in terms of our youth.
Okay.
They had more resources, so our youth went to their campus to participate in their youth programs. Well, when we went to observe, our kids were separated. And we asked questions and come to find out there were members in that congregation that complained to the pastor that they didn't want their children hanging out with kids of a different color these children. And so the pastor, instead of being the leader that he needed to be, he was tied into keeping, status quo.
Wow.
Don't rock the boat, keep the tithe-paying parishioners happy.
Yeah.
And so he gave in to that.
I've watched a lot of that this last couple of weeks. Have you seen this? I mean, this is a sidetrack, but I've watched this, and maybe you don't have access to this, but I got a fair amount of people of all different races that are leading churches on my Facebook or my my Instagram or whatever. But I've noticed that I don't think the white guys knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this thing went off, and we were like, I think there was a fear. We live in cancel culture now.
Yeah.
And there was a fear like, if we say anything, whatever we say is going to be taken the wrong way. And so I think a bunch of guys that first week out, that first Sunday, they didn't say anything.
Right.
And then I saw the next Sunday, it was like everybody was taping an apology. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, literally everybody's like, okay,
right.
I'm sorry I didn't speak to this.
Right.
I don't think it clicked how momentous until the aftermath this actually was.
Right. Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's not time to be silent.
Yes. It's time to step in.
It's time to step in.
Yeah.
But this is what I want to say this to the African-American community, the Hispanic community, and all communities that are considered minorities.
Okay.
That we need to honor the humanity in everyone.
Yeah.
Example of that is Drew Brees made some comments that were ill-timed, ill-placed.
Yeah.
Although I think his heart was in the right place in terms of what he said, there was nothing directly egregious in terms of what he said. It's just in light of what we just saw with the George Floyd incident.
Yeah.
And for you to come and not speak to the
incident in its time.
Indecency of that, and to say, okay, the flag is perhaps more important. That seems to be the message that was implied in what he said. That
I agree with you, and I worry because like even now as I say these words, I'm like, okay, have a little grace, because I'm literally like the white guy. Of course, he's going to say this, but I look at the Drew Brees situation and I'm like, okay, I get this.
Right.
I have enough military guys in this church to tell you. I'm telling you right now, black and white. Stop watching football a couple of years ago because some of these guys were on a battlefield fighting for that flag.
That's right.
Do you know what I'm saying? So they have a different view of it. Their worldview is not our worldview. We haven't walked in their shoes.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think Drew Brees was trying to say, like, hey, this is my perspective on this. I don't want to disgrace this flag in any way. Yes, insensitive in the moment. Yes, not the right moment. Yes, bad. But the other side to me was like, I know a little bit about Drew Brees.
Yeah.
This guy has bent over backwards and made some huge donations, and huge acts of service to the New Orleans community, specifically communities of minorities that are there after Katrina and after all of these events that have taken place that have been crushing even COVID-19. And I'm like, guys, let's not kill our, let's not friendly fire and take down the guys that are on our team too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I get it. I get that it was not the best moment.
Right.
But I who did I hear? Like Charles Barkley or somebody was going, come on, guys. You know what I'm saying? Take it easy.
Take it easy. Yeah.
Have a little grace, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, just like I don't understand the military perspective, I don't understand the shoes you've walked in, right? And I think everybody's got to show some grace and not this cancel culture as we work through this, as we talk through. It's going to get messy. If we're going to talk, it's going to get messy.
Yeah, yeah. And I totally agree with that. He should not be crucified.
Right.
We have to honor the humanity in everyone and allow everyone to have voice what they feel and what their belief system is. Yeah. And the way you do that is you take in consideration of the fact that you're not going to say everything right. I'm black, and I'm going to be politically incorrect a lot. I'm going to be insensitive at times because we're all human. Yeah. We're all broken in some area where we don't respond the way we should respond in every incident. And so I should give you a reprieve because I take my own limitations. I take my own maladies into consideration. Right. And so I give you a reprieve and give you an opportunity to grow from that, to maybe apologize from that, or even accept the fact that, hey, this is your stance. How can I partner with you? Because going back to what I said earlier, we need Drew Brees to sponsor us. Yeah. We don't need to push Drew Brees and everybody like Drew Brees away. No, we need Drew Brees. Yeah, yeah. And so we, as the African-American community, we need to say, okay, how can we get them to sponsor us? And how can we sponsor them? Yeah. Because it's this mutual sponsorship that allows us to have the real conversation. The collaboration. The conversation, so that you're not on the hook, right? Because I got you. Yeah. I got you, and you got me with the power structure. Yeah. Because you have a bit more leverage. Yeah. And I need your sponsorship in order for them to hear me and begin to change policies and things of that nature. I agree. There's a psychologist by the name of Daniel Simon. Okay. He did a great work. He wrote a book called The Invisible Gorilla. Okay. And he basically hones in on this concept of selective attention. Okay. That the good part about us human beings is we're able to focus. The things we want to focus on? On the things we want to focus on. But when we focus, we miss so much. We miss a bunch of other stimuli, a bunch of other things that are going on. Is this the dancing gorilla thing? This is the dancing gorilla. I've seen that. That's a great example. And so he does this. Experiment, and so it's the gorilla where it's people wearing a white shirt, and there's people wearing a black shirt. And he tells you to count how many times the white shirts pass the ball. Right. Okay? Yeah. And so you're focusing on, okay, 1, 2, 3. And this gorilla just creeps into the middle of that, stops and say, and keeps walking, and nobody sees it. And nobody sees it. Nobody sees it. And then so once the experiment is over, okay, how many times the ball was passed? If you said 15, you got it right. People said 13. People said 15. Some people said 18. Yeah. And then, of course, the experimenter says, okay, did you see the gorilla? And everybody's mouth just drops. What are you talking about? What gorilla? And I did this experiment with my church. Okay. Nobody got the gorilla. Yeah. I showed the video too in church. Funny story, I did. I showed this video in church. Wonderful, man. And so that speaks to what we're talking about right now. Yeah. That when a group have been traumatized, a group has been marginalized, and that's been their experience. They have selective attention, and so a lot of, like Drew Brees, if it's not in that selective attention circle, then that's not part of the solution. It's outside of my pain. It's outside of my experience. And if you're not speaking to this, then you're not really part. And that's happening on both sides, right? I mean, think about it. Like from a person who's speaking as the white guy that's speaking,
there's a certain amount of like shaping that takes place to my worldview with the people I've been around, the people I've had conversations with, the stuff that I've read, where I'm putting my focus.
Yeah.
And if you're walking a different cultural experience, then it's potentially possible that we're looking at the same set of events from two different angles and seeing what we want to see.
That's right. That's precisely what's going on.
And I think I love the idea that you're saying about the idea of like, how did you say it? You said, I got to get your sponsorship, you got to get mine. I love that because at some point we got to show each other grace in this, because it's not that your perspective or my perspective is wrong.
Right.
We got to first trust
Right.
that our hearts are in the right place, that we want what's best for these communities. We want what's best for unity. We want what's best for peace. But we may have just not seen it from that perspective yet. We may have not looked at it through that lens yet, and that's going to be messy.
Yeah.
And every time you challenge me to see it from your perspective, you're not condemning me.
Right.
And every time I challenge you to see it from mine, I'm not being racist.
Right. That's exactly right.
Does that make sense?
Right. And that's what sponsorship
I feel like that's
means.
what's missing.
That's what's missing, and that's what sponsorship means.
Yeah.
Sponsorship means that I'm going to honor your humanity, and honoring in your humanity, I'm going to honor your worldview, your perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it in such a way where we engage.
Yeah.
Because I need for you to engage with me too.
Yeah.
You haven't experienced what I experienced. I haven't experienced what you experienced.
Yeah.
But this idea of sponsorship is this love and humanity where we honor each other.
Yeah.
To be who we are. You don't have to compromise and be someone different just so that you can fit within my cultural context.
Yeah.
I can't make moral demands on you. And I think that's what's happening in the African American community. We're making moral demands on people of a different color. And we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do that because we don't have the right to do that. We're broken as well, and it's that selective attention. I haven't experienced what you've experienced, and you haven't experienced what I've experienced.
Yeah.
But if we're going to have a conversation where we engage with one another, we need to embrace this idea of sponsoring one another, honoring one another's humanity.
Yeah.
Appreciate your perspective, and then when you articulate your particular point of view, if there's something that needs to be challenged, I can challenge it in a way that it's still decent.
Yeah.
It still honors your humanity.
Yeah.
I can be vigilant. I can be courageous. I can be firm, but I can also be loving, kind, and honoring my brother's humanity
In the moment.
In the moment. Yeah.
So let's try a little bit of it. Yeah. What do you need? I'm the representative right now, and you're the representative. We're the federal heads of these cultural backgrounds. What do you need the white guy to see that he's missing? We're at a moment where I think we've hit the pause button, like Jesus going to the tomb of Lazarus, where it says that he stopped and paused, and then he wept.
Yeah.
I think there's a moment in the collective humanity of all Americans where we're like, oh, and we're listening.
Yeah.
What do you need us to say?
I'm encouraged from what I already see.
Okay.
I've never seen the kind of participation that I see today from white America in terms of protests. I mean, they're literally leading the protests.
Yeah.
And when you look at protests happening all across this nation, even here in Central Florida,
right.
I mean, there are people, white America's leading it.
Yeah.
They have signs on every corner saying Black Lives Matter because they now weep with us.
Yeah.
That act was so egregious that you cannot deny that we have a fundamental problem in this country.
Right.
And I'm encouraged by that. And that's what the Black community needs. They need just someone to understand and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to walk with you on this.
Solidarity.
Agreement. I'm going to walk with you. I agree with you, and I apologize that we perhaps didn't get it long ago, but we get it now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just team up together, and let's engage with one another, sponsor one another. Mm-hmm. You know, you're going to need me to sponsor you so that you can have the conversation you need to have.
Yeah.
You know, in your church, which is multicultural.
Yeah.
You have plenty of sponsors here.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for you not to have those kind of engaging conversations.
Absolutely.
Once you have, set the context, because I need your sponsorship and you need mine.
Right.
And how do you get that? We honor each other's humanity. And there's nobody who does that better than the Church of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Because in our hearts should be flowing love. In our hearts should be flowing this mutual understanding, this embracing, this kindness, this reprieve that we give each other. If you say something that's off point, I'm not going to crucify you.
Yeah.
And if I can convince you that I'm not going to crucify you, what is that going to do for you?
Yeah.
You know.
Let me give you an example. I think that gets at the heart of what you're saying that I used last night in my Wednesday night address to the church. You've heard all of this controversy that surrounds the phrasing, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And then there's been a response by many that says all lives matter.
Yeah.
Right. And you're very acquainted with the idea that for most of the Black community, they hear this and they interpret it as a very like it's a shift in the conversation, a racist shift in the conversation. And I was using this illustration last night. I was saying, I actually used the words. I said, okay, this is a white guy talking to my white friends. Black lives matter, period. Right? Can we just
establish
that right now? Do you know what I'm saying? Okay, everybody good? We're good. Okay. But then I said, and this is a white guy to my Black friends. I said, now let's remember this and give us a little grace. I actually used the same words. I said, give me some grace here.
Yeah.
We've been telling our kids, and my family's been telling me for the last 40 years to be colorblind.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Don't see color. And I showed all these quotes. Jennifer Lopez, Michael Jackson, all of these people, have been saying, be colorblind, be colorblind, be colorblind. You know what I mean? And so when my 12-year-old heard Black Lives Matter for the first time, he actually said the words, don't all lives matter?
Sure.
Right? And what he was saying was, you've been telling me not to look at this.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I then had to explain to him why that would be interpreted from the pain of this community as a shift in the conversation, right? I had to say, okay, let me explain why. It's not all, but it's not easily picked up. It's not like, I think what I'm trying to say is, I think there has to be a little grace. Guys, yes, we understand. I don't think everybody that's saying all lives matter is like, we don't think Black lives matter either, right? They're not trying to be racist. They're like, hey, we've been ingrained with colorblind. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, now we're going to highlight color. And we haven't yet had the conversation. Why are we highlighting? This is important at this moment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, do you get that? Did you go through that whole thing in the last couple of weeks with Black Lives and all lives and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I was raised in a household where we were judged by the content of our character versus the color of our skin. So my father, he worked at NASA, so he was an educated man. Yeah. He was a pastor as well. So we had a balanced perspective in terms of growing up. I get it when they say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
To me, that's just saying this house is on fire.
Right.
And we need to focus on getting this house, getting the firemen to come and put this fire out.
Right.
Because this house is on fire.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret Black Lives Matter.
Right.
For me, fundamentally, all lives matter.
Yeah.
As a pastor, I have, even if I'm
this
not
goes
a pastor,
back to that biblical worldview.
This is the biblical worldview that really God meant for the world to be diverse. He meant for dark people to be here. He meant for white people to be here. He meant for olive tone people to be here. Because God loves diversity. You look at the terrain, you look at the flowers, there's no terrain that's the same, no flower. There's different, a myriad of different flowers and things of that nature. So we get it. Diversity is there. But the reason why we're having this conversation, all lives matter, the reason why we're having this conversation that Black lives matter, because we're still trying to process and make sense of all of the trauma, all of the fallout, all of the brokenness that is reflected from sin.
Yeah.
Sin is what causes all of this. And until we have the real conversation, we're going to still be circling around the symptoms.
Yeah. It feels very surfacey right
It's
now.
very surfacey.
Yeah.
And that's, that's the reason why the church needs to take control of the narrative, should be heading up this protest And when you have an opportunity to speak into the microphone, although I doubt CNN or Fox News is going to air something as sound as,
two pastors sitting around talking about sin problems. Yeah, not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
No, that doesn't sell soap.
No.
Yeah.
But, for me, the biblical view is absolutely necessary, and that's what I preach to my kids. That's what I preach to my congregation, because if you look at the Bible and you see yourself in the narrative of being unfaithful to God, if you see yourself in the narrative of being the woman who was caught in adultery, it has nothing to do with gender. It's just the fallenness of human beings.
I agree.
And you see how Jesus comes to the scene and elevates her.
Yeah.
He doesn't dishonor her humanity. He honors her humanity.
Yeah.
And say, look, where are your accusers?
Yeah.
Well, there's none, Lord.
Yeah.
Well, the person who had the right to accuse her, the sovereign ruler of the universe, doesn't accuse her.
Yeah.
And says, neither do I.
Yeah.
Go and sin no more.
It's powerful.
So if we, as the black community, can embrace Christ-like principles as we engage in our protests, as we engage in confronting the power structure, because we do need to engage the power structure. We do need to confront it. Frederick Douglass said this, that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will.
Right.
We do need to confront it, but we need the sponsorship of our white brothers to lead the conversation, because there's more leverage there. Okay. We just have to be honest.
Yeah.
If we're honest, and if we're, I'm a businessman,
yeah.
and, to me, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you're a great prospect, I'm going to sign you up. So
trying to cut a deal.
Baby. Money has no color. I mean, money doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, that's right.
So, we need to embrace, if we have the biblical view, that just creates this opportunity for us to really have an engaging conversation.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm in mourning in advance.
Mourning in advance.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears to where we can both get in trouble. Okay. And I've felt this pressure over the last couple of recordings, the last couple of weeks. So let's talk about the policing issue. And let's preface that conversation with, I'm betting you know law enforcement people. I know law enforcement people, most of which are very good people. We are going to have to paint with a big brush because we have to have this conversation. But we mean no offense to any good, well-meaning, morally upright law enforcement people. Are you with me?
Right.
Okay. But what do we got to do here? I mean, what you've cased it in like a big sweeping term of power structure, but obviously there's this undercurrent of discussion now around policing and around like how do we address whatever reform needs to take place within policing. What's your perspective on this? Because it's got to be different than mine.
First of all, I want to just give a shout out to all of those who bear the badge, who are out there policing and putting their lives on the line.
Yeah.
Thank God for you. We need you.
Yeah.
We're in a broken and fallen society.
Yeah.
And I don't know what our society looks like without our police.
Absolutely.
Without those men and women who have that badge and out creating order out of chaos.
Yeah.
I don't know where our society would be. So I want to give a shout out to our police department. I do honor you and do have the utmost respect. I have people who are in law enforcement, and my brother is a chaplain at the Orange County Sheriff's Station.
Yeah.
So we have some great men and women working in our police departments, and this police officer who kept his knee on George Floyd's neck is an anomaly.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now I think you have more of them than there should be.
Okay.
And so that's where we have to get into police reform.
Have you had a bad experience with a police officer?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Well, it's more of, man, I tell you. So let me share this. We do get profiled.
Okay.
I remember I lived in Errol Estates. It's a nice community in Apopka.
Okay.
And I was in my Durango, and I pulled up into Errol Estates, and so this police car started following me. And so I said, geez, I turned this way, and he turned that way. I turned this way, and he turned that way because I'm going home.
Okay.
And my wife said, "Why is he following me?" I said, "Don't worry, honey. He's running our tag, and he's going to get it back probably in about 15 seconds. He's going to turn off because he's going to see that we live in this neighborhood."
Yeah.
So I just kept going, and I just drove slow, kept going, and sure enough, he turned off.
Okay.
Because he ran the tags and saw that I actually lived there.
Yeah.
But we get racially profiled all the time,
Sure.
and that's unfortunate. But at the same time, I had a bad experience with a black police officer.
Did you?
Yes. And my experience with the black police officer was worse than the white police officer.
Wow. What happened?
So I was on my way to a church picnic, and my SUV was packed with food and supplies, and I had my kids sitting on top of stuff there.
Okay.
You know, I think I had two kids.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't in the seatbelt because there weren't no
Right.
seatbelt
Yeah.
to put them in.
Yeah.
And so this police officer, this patrol officer, highway patrol officer, stopped me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. She just saw that my truck was loaded and probably saw the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So she stopped me, and, you know, I rolled down the window. "Let me see your driver's license and your insurance." I said, "Officer, I'm going to a church picnic. I know this looks bad, but I'm just trying to make it there with all the supplies. Let me see your driver's license and your insurance card." And I was explaining to her, "Hey, look, we're going to an outing. You know, I'm the guy who's bringing all the supplies.
You're holding up the whole
You're holding up. Come on, let me go." And she didn't. She had shades on. She did not acknowledge anything that I said, and she wrote me a ticket, a nice large ticket, for not having people in their seatbelts. Yeah. And so that was a bad experience with insensitive police officer, and they happen to be black.
Yeah.
So we have bad police officers. Well, when I say bad, we have insensitive police officers on both sides of the spectrum.
Don't you think that nobody's talking? Maybe there are people talking about this, but I'm not going to speak for everybody else. But don't you think that sometimes that there can, and many times is, a race component in police encounters that turn out how we saw with George Floyd?
Yeah.
But doesn't it feel like nobody's really having the in-depth conversation? And again, I'm with you. I'm supporting law enforcement. I love my law enforcement people. I'm not painting with a broad. I am painting with a broad brush, but it's not intended to be targeted at anybody.
Right.
When police officers have a special power.
Yeah.
We've endowed them with a level of power in our communities, and sometimes when people are given power can be abused.
Yes.
And it's not always about race. This goes back to the sin problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not always about race.
Right.
Sometimes it's about this power that's being used in a negative way. Yeah. I mean, I won't go into the whole thing and say who, but we've had an experience with a police officer. Doesn't matter which department, right here, and they don't go to this church. Okay, but where my wife and I have said, this guy has lost his mind. The power. Yeah. He's on a power trip. Yeah. Like, ridiculous. I mean, interesting story. I had the kids. We had a turtle crossing the road. A turtle was crossing the road. I stopped the car, let the kids out to get the turtle across the road. Right. I had a cop come up, light me up, yelling at me, blocking the road. And I'm like, hey, I'm serving the light. I'm trying to have the turtle cross. But I mean, he really kind of went into this whole thing. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, are you just having a bad day? Yeah. What's wrong with you? But there's this sense of like disconnect on the power sometimes. Yeah. That as look, and maybe law enforcement, maybe that's their perspective. It's hard for them to see my perspective, but it feels like it's very adversarial. Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. What do you think?
Absolutely. And, so the reason why you were able to share that with me just now is because I sponsored you.
Okay. I like it.
I sponsored you. Yeah. I didn't come across as hating on the police. Right. I came across as saying I had a bad experience on both sides of the spectrum. Yeah. And that gave you the autonomy to be able to just share that experience, right? Yeah. I sponsored you, and I'm glad you shared that experience because it brings a broader perspective. Right. That power corrupts. Right. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. I think you're spot on. Yeah. It goes back to the biblical view
Yeah.
We can't handle power.
Right.
If you're in a position like I'm a pastor, you're a pastor, we have a certain amount of influence, so we have to put measures in place where we're accountable.
Yeah.
To people.
Yes.
To so that we can stay in check,
Yeah.
right? Because we recognize the kind of influence that we have.
Yeah.
That's what good police departments, in terms of reforming, they need to create a culture, number one, that allows policemen to hold other policemen accountable and not just embrace each other because you're part of this fraternity.
Yeah.
And say, okay, I got your back no matter what. No, I don't have your back no matter what. If there's policies that are in place, laws that are in place that empowers policing to hold each other accountable, right? In a way that's respectful, in a way that's honorable, in a way that is not subjective but objective.
Yeah.
That's what's needed. That reform needs to take place in our police departments.
Yeah. Because
there is an element of power that's there that they tend to abuse. Here's another thing. I was on my way to just yesterday, maybe yesterday.
Oh, boy.
This patrol officer. So I'm in the fast lane, and this patrol officer is coming up behind me real fast. And so the first thing I do, you know what I did?
Yeah.
I looked at my speedometer.
Yeah.
Am I going the right speed?
Yeah.
Okay, what's going on here? So I just, I stayed in the fast lane, moved past the other guy because I didn't know what this guy was doing.
Yeah.
I wasn't over the speed limit that much, so I figured that he wasn't coming after me.
Yeah.
So I just speeded up a little and, and just gave him space to get around me because he was moving fast. I didn't get into the right lane. I stayed in the lane I was because I didn't want to intrude him on. I just wanted to just keep an even kill.
Obviously, he's going somewhere.
Yeah, he's going somewhere fast.
Yeah.
So he, instead of getting into the right lane, bro, he stayed behind me.
Oh, wow.
Like for the next 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like
Which on the road going 70 is like a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And he was like, he had an attitude like I didn't get out of his way.
Okay.
So he wanted me to move out of the fast lane.
Yeah.
And so he eventually scurried off into the right lane and sped off.
Yeah. And did the whole, like, you can tell by just the way they're driving, like, I'm upset with you.
Yeah. You didn't, honor me. I'm the patrol officer, the highway patrol officer. You're supposed to get out my way when I'm trying to move somewhere. And after I saw him driving and speeding and so forth, I said, you know what? This guy's just going home. He's not on duty right now.
No.
The way he's acting right now, he's not on duty. He's not going after anybody. He's just trying to use his power to move people out of the way so he can get home.
Yeah.
So I shared that to say I think you're onto something. I think there is an element of power that they bear, and that power can corrupt if it goes unchecked. And so the police department, when it comes to reforming with all of the protests, they need to start, number one, they need to remove these laws of immunity out of the way. If a police officer is guilty of certain things, they need to be held to the fullest extent of the law.
Right.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
And then I think the culture, the internal culture needs to change where they have policies that empower police officers to be able to hold each other accountable. And instead of and when I say hold each other accountable, honor the humanity in everyone. So if a police officer is being a bit more forceful than they should, have them go take some classes. Yeah. Have a process that you take them through to help them develop these virtues and skills, these tools in that area.
Let me tell you, I've got a quick fix.
Yeah.
I think I can fix the whole thing. You ready?
All right.
I'm gonna fix it all right now.
You'll fix it all.
I'm gonna fix it all right. And I'm gonna give you the example when it dawned on me that I think this is the fix. I think that the answer is if we could assure to integrate policing across the nation, every city, right, where there was a very healthy integration of and representation of different cultures, different backgrounds, different races as police. And let me tell you where it dawned on me. I'm watching this protest. I think the protest it may have been New Jersey. I can't remember. I'm watching this protest, and there's a white cop. He's got a black girl protesting in front of it, kneeling. And he takes her while she's not doing anything. She's just kneeling.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she's being annoying, like standing in front of him and kneeling or whatever, but she's not doing anything.
No.
And he took her and threw her on the ground. Just literally just threw her on the ground. I mean, she's kneeling, so it didn't take much just to like toss her, right? And then immediately there was like another black cop who was obviously his superior, was a woman, and literally just grabbed him and yanked him off the line, this white cop, and was like, oh, hell no. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, that ain't going to go down. And it was an immediate correction.
Right.
There was an immediate accountability.
Right.
Like, don't you feel like some of this would get solved if we do policing more integrated?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I look at Kissimmee Police Department, fairly integrated police department. A lot of the young officers are Hispanic. We have a big Hispanic population here. And here's the funny thing about the white community, speaking as a white guy, we don't care what race the police officer is. We're very pro-police. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I just look at that and I go, I love the fact that our police department is very diverse and racially diverse, and I think it holds everybody in the police department accountable. If you're standing shoulder to shoulder with somebody of another race as a brother in blue, it gets really hard. I think it puts a lot of pressure on you, on you to be racist in your job,
Right.
if you have tendencies to be bigoted.
Right. Right.
Did I solve it?
Yeah. Well, I think with the black officer shoving that guy out of the way.
No, white officer
the
shoved
white
that guy.
officer shoved it.
And the black officer corrected it.
Okay, so the white officer shoved the guy who was the woman who was kneeling.
Yes.
And the black officer who was his ranking,
Yes.
higher ranked than he was, corrected it.
Yes.
I wonder if that would have happened
If he was lower rank?
if they were lower
Equal?
ranked or the George Floyd incident hadn't happened.
I tell you this, that I think the reason the boil over is because we can agree on this point. If there wasn't a video of the George Floyd, I don't care if you're white or black, no one's convinced that this cop would be arrested right now.
Right.
That's the
correct.
problem.
That's the problem. That's right. That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure that's a racial problem.
Right.
That goes back to that power problem again.
Yeah.
And that's what I look at and I go, I think this conversation's bigger than just race.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? When we get to the answers
Yeah.
and the policing, I'll go, I think that happens. I had this big panel discussion with these guys the other day. I was the only white guy and had all these people in here from the congregation, and they were like, "Oh, okay, you're about to get it." And we were talking about that issue, and I said, "Yeah, but guys, I don't believe if that guy would have been Hispanic, Asian, or white, if he killed him, that he would have been arrested.
Right.
If there wasn't a video.
That's right. That's right.
And that's
a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a problem. And the three other police officers that just
Stood there
and stood there and just was complicit with this egregious
That's a good
act.
point. So my point, that's a counterbalance to my point, because I'm saying, hey, they were holding each other accountable, but you're like, not with Floyd.
No, not with Floyd.
Not with Floyd.
No.
That's a good point.
But it goes back to the point that you're making. The police department needs to be more diverse.
Yeah.
So that you do have that diversity element there, so that perhaps can happen.
So let me push a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is where, I start to get worried that I'm like, okay, DeLong.
I'll sponsor you, bro.
Yeah, thanks for sponsoring this. It feels like to me that in the white community there is a high level of respect for law enforcement. And you grow up thinking, I want to be, like you grow up as a little kid going, I want to be cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, I want to be a cop. It doesn't feel, and maybe rightfully so, that there's that level of admiration for law enforcement in the black community. And I think that's a barrier to creating more avenues and more integration into law enforcement from the black community that I think we much need.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like what do you do about that? Like how do you model honor? Okay, so let's say 98% of all law enforcement, or even if it's less, 90%, whatever, is good people. Right. How do we honor that and model that and say this is a good thing in your community?
Well, I think with the great work that our men and women in uniform do, and many of the police departments have great community programs where the police go out to the actual community,
right,
and they
do community policing.
yeah. And more than just policing, they're actually becoming a part of the community where they're out playing basketball with the community.
Yeah.
They're out playing softball with the community.
Yeah.
They're
So it's the people in the power that model it.
Yes.
We can't do it without them too.
We need their sponsorship.
We need the police departments to see the value of community policing.
Yeah.
And even if they say, well, we've been trying, we need to say, we got to try harder.
You got to try harder.
Yeah.
You got to try harder. And it's not that we've been trying. There's no other recourse.
Yeah.
This is it. You have to become a part of the community.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I'm pretty sure the statistics show that there's less violence.
Yes.
When police go and become part of the community.
I agree.
And I'm not talking about becoming part of the community where they're holding a baton over somebody. And I'm not talking about that kind
community policing.
Yeah.
Relationship
building.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, so when they do that and, somebody is out twerking and then the police gets out and twerk, and make a fool of themselves.
Yeah.
And I just know that does a ton of good in that community. And regardless of what your color is, we see you as an intricate part of the community, and we see you as a friend. We see you as an ally. We see you as all of the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to take place. More of that.
Bridge building, community-oriented, relational. And this is like you becoming a part of the tribe. Mm-hmm. The community is not, the police is not outside of the tribe. Yeah. They're part of the tribe. Yeah. And when they see themselves as part of the tribe and the tribe sees themselves as part of the tribe, right,
I think that's when we're moving forward with great momentum.
Are you worried about the undercurrent to the Black Lives Matter movement, who is pushing what I would call a much more liberal agenda and a much more extreme position, which is saying defund the police, abolish the police departments in certain cities?
Yeah.
Are you worried about that? I
am worried about that. I think Cornel West mentioned that on some interview that I saw him on. It might have been Fox.
Yeah.
That's a bit extreme.
Yeah. But Minneapolis the city council just voted to defund.
Really?
Yeah, and they're holding other votes in cities around the United States. It's a pretty extreme position, but I think the emotion of the moment has pushed us to a radical outcome in some places.
No, we need calmer minds to be in charge of the situation right now. Right now is, it's not the time to make policy right now.
Right.
It's the time to just...
For solidarity.
Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Let's just sit down and relax. We don't need to make decisions based on emotionalism.
Yeah.
We need calmer, thoughtful minds to take charge and precedent over.
Well, I appreciate that sponsorship, because I look at that and I'm like, yikes, that's a bad idea.
No, that's a bad idea.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I feel like saying that is like, you're risking it again.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Like, no, we do need to defund it. You're racist.
Of course you would say that.
Because you're white.
Yeah.
No, we need our police.
Yeah.
We're in a fallen world.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when there's no police?
Yeah. That's my thinking too, man.
Okay.
Like, who you going to call?
Who you going to call? Ghostbusters?
Look, bro, if there's a problem, you getting held up or whatever, you can't call a social worker.
Dude, you can't call a social worker. No, you need to call somebody who's equipped, trained to be able to handle the situation.
Yeah.
And nobody does that better than our professional law enforcement officers. So defunding the police department is an emotional decision. It's a decision that's made in the moment. And my goodness, shame on Minnesota for, somebody should have stood up and say, look, let's just relax a little bit. Let's wait. Let's show solidarity right now. Right. Let's relax and let's come back and think about this. Have a panel discussion, have a collaboration, form a committee that will help lead the way in reform of the police department, because we know that the George Floyd incident can't continue to happen. It can't happen. We need to correct that, but we need to do it in a very thoughtful way where we're still honoring our people in badge, but at the same time, we are not going to allow egregious acts to go unchecked. Yeah.
I agree. All right, let me ask you a couple more things. These are challenging, I know, but it's definitely a part of the landscape of the social media discussion that has it has stood out to me. And it is hard, like, again, as I say these things, I'm like, oh, you're running the risk of like, this looks like you're attacking, but I'm really not. I really want to know, like, how can we, if we're going to address the evil problem, the broken problem, the sin problem, we got to have to address the whole thing at some point. Maybe it's not, maybe right now we do have to stand completely in solidarity. We can't change the focus, but give me your thoughts on this. I saw this number the other day. It is shocking to me. I know there's this undercurrent of discussion that's saying, hey, yes, this was egregious, but when we start talking about police reform, crime, all these things, there's a bigger problem at play, and we have a lot of crime and a disproportionate amount of crime in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this number, it was shocking to me, and I need your 2 cents on this. 67% of black children are born in a single-parent home.
Yeah.
What is happening? Like, what is going on there?
Yeah, so that's really one of the variables that created the entire George Floyd, that helps to create the George Floyd incident as well.
How?
Because so I don't know George Floyd's
Right.
story. I don't know all of the facts and details, but knowing his struggle, the little that I read of him,
Right.
I don't think his father was intricately a part of his life.
Wow.
And statistics clearly show that children that are born in a 2-parent household flourish.
Game changer.
That's a game changer, bro.
Yeah.
And far too long, the black male has been missing in the black community, and mother or grandmother, because sometimes the mother and the mother and the father is missing,
Gone.
and they're not parenting their children, and the grandmother's raising the child.
Yeah.
And it's a repeated cycle, over and over. And so when you don't, you're the first layer of government for any child is the parent, is the home, is the parental structure.
Yeah.
That's where you learn respect. That's where you learn values.
Yeah.
That's where you learn your identity. That's where you get your affirmation from.
Yeah.
If you don't get those things, then you're going to get them from other sources that may not be all that healthy for you.
Yeah.
And you think about Chicago, what's going on in Chicago,
Crazy.
the black on black crime.
Chirac.
It's a train wreck.
Yeah.
It is terrible. It's almost to the point where, is it fixable?
Yeah.
Because it's that bad.
Yeah.
But I think fundamentally at the heart of those problems is the missing father in the home.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't say enough of how critical that is and how detrimental that has been to the black community, the father being missing in the black family.
Do you feel a burden as a pastor speaking to that community specifically to address that and to figure out ways to model that and lead on that issue?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is tough because, you have to be, that's where I have to be sensitive too.
Yeah. Right.
Because you got to realize that a lot of the people in the black community, that's their normal.
Right.
So you have to be sensitive to the fact that that's their normal. How do you say it in a way that honors their humanity?
Right.
That
Boy, that's
honors
a good
their
point.
dignity.
That's a good point.
But
You got your own tough task.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. So I need probably a sponsor from someone that I can speak to these issues, man.
Yeah.
Because it is tough.
How long you been married?
I've been married for 34 years.
See.
Yeah.
I think you're living it.
Yeah.
I think your life is the example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is she was born in a single parent household.
Yeah.
And her mother was not educated.
Mm.
She did domestic work to take care of herself and her daughter.
Okay.
But my wife is one of the sweetest people in the world.
Yeah.
But she definitely struggles with that affirmation,
Mm.
that confidence,
Mm-hmm.
that identity. And what's helped her is her relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
Of course, and then of course being married to me, as imperfect as I have been in the relationship, a lot of what I have to do is I have to almost play the role of father in many ways.
Right.
I have to father her, and it's because when those components are missing,
it's a vacuum.
It's a vacuum, bro.
Wow.
So but I lived that, and I know the impact of not having a father in your life, what it does to you. And even for decent people like my wife, how much they miss out on but not having that father, that affirmation, that confidence builder, because that's where all that comes from. That comes from the father.
I worry that gets lost in the conversation. I worry that when we get to a place like this, we need to address a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And any deviation, and maybe it's just not the right time, any deviation from the solidarity of the moment feels like a change in the conversation, feels like we're skirting around confronting the awfulness of George Floyd's murder.
Yeah.
But if we're really going to solve things at some level, and that's not the only thing. I mean, there's hundreds of things that have to be addressed in our communities and our worldviews and the way we think and the way we process. And there's things in policing, there's things in the black community, there's things in the white community. There's all this stuff that has to be addressed. But it's like anytime you want to start talking about these things, it gets messy.
It gets messy. It gets messy, and it can be misconstrued if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to mutually engage in the conversation. And I'm big on you sponsoring me, and I'm sponsoring you, because when I do that, you're off the hook.
Yeah.
In a way, it gives you the win to be able to have that conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So, man, with the conversation that needs to take place within the black community, especially when it comes to the absence of the father. Maybe that conversation starts off with, scientific data that backs up what are the impacts of a father in a home.
The numbers. Yeah,
because you can't argue with the data.
I had a conversation this past week where I said, hey, can we talk about some of these numbers? And literally, the emotion's so high right now.
Yeah.
They were like, numbers be damned. I don't care about your numbers.
Right.
They're
right
like,
now.
I care about my feelings. Yeah. And so in the moment, I pressed, and I probably shouldn't. It probably looked a little aggressive. I pressed, and I probably shouldn't. It's actually on one of our podcasts. I was like, I kept pressing. No, we got to face this. We got to face this. But I think we do. I'm just not sure when the right time. It's like, when do we jump in and start like dealing with all this?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, we got to talk about policing. All law enforcement gets a little worried what we're going to say. You know what I mean? We got to talk about, crime across the board. Black communities, like, you're changing the conversation. We got to talk about the leftover residue of systemic racism in the white communities, like, doesn't exist.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, we got to talk about it all, and everybody's still camping in their areas, and they're like, no, I'm not ready to do it.
Well, and I have a perspective about systemic racism. I have a perspective about a lot of the terminology that is being used to label these atrocious incidents that have been taking place in our country for the last 200, 300 years or whatever. It goes back for me for a biblical view. But we do have to talk about the situation in terms of the symptoms, because that's the way we start trying to resolve it, because everybody don't have a biblical view. Mm-hmm. But I think if we approach it where we do address the symptoms, but we start bringing in this, taking a scientific approach to it, adding data to it. Okay, if we do this, here's the outcome of that. And how can we help? How can we help the community move forward where we eliminate this problem where there's lack of father leadership in the home? What can we do to help that move forward? Yeah. And then, this sensitivity that needs to take place on both sides where we honor each other's humanity is big for me. So regardless of what the conversation is, let's understand and approach it that we're all human beings. We're all broken. We're all fallen. And I have selective attention.
Me too.
There are things that I don't see that I need to see.
Yeah.
And you have to help me see them.
Yeah.
And there are things that you don't see that I have to help you see.
Yeah.
Because we understand that, hey, we're all in this sort of scope where we have limited vision, limited experience. Our experience limits us so that we don't understand experiences on all sides of the table.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why it's important for us to engage in conversation. And while we're engaged in the conversation, let's be decent. Let's honor each other's humanity. And then when you've developed that trust like you and I have, let's sponsor each other.
Yeah.
Let's give you the go ahead to have that conversation.
I agree.
And let me stand and back you. And in those when it's time for me to stand up and speak on an issue that may need to come from me, I can do that.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think the solidarity piece for now is good. That's what we need until the emotional sort of quells a little bit. Yeah. And then after emotional quells, while that emotionalism is going on, real leadership needs to be devising a strategy as to how we're going to move this country forward in light of all these incidents, how we're going to reform the police department in a way that honors them, that honors their humanity, that shows that, hey, we respect you, but, hey, we do need some reform in these areas. How can we do that in an honorable way?
Yeah.
And then how can we engage in a conversation where, Black lives matter, all lives matter. How can we engage in a conversation that moves it from the surface and say, look, saying Black lives matter and all lives matter is become a cliche.
Yeah.
How do we move beyond the cliches and get to the real, get to a place where we have real relationship, real value with each other?
Yeah.
How can we move it there?
Yeah.
And so that's where I am with all of that's taken place over the last 40 days. I've been there pretty much all my life. That's because, for me, the problem just didn't start.
Yeah.
The problem didn't just start with George Floyd. The problem didn't just start with Ahmaud Arbery. It didn't just start with Breonna. It didn't just start with police brutality that's been a part of this country as much as apple pie is. When we go back and look at other societies, when we look at different different nations, we look at different historical points, we are left with the same narrative that it just eventually sin has a way of corroding, corrupting, and devaluing the society eventually. And except the Bible, like the Bible says in Romans 9:29, except God left the seed. Yeah. Except God left the seed, that society was going to be just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. That's how bad it is. That's how far-reaching sin is. Yeah. It's just a matter of time before it literally decays the entire society, except that preservation is there. That's why we're salt and light, and that's the reason why we should step to the forefront and take leadership roles and try to take charge of this narrative that's going on in our nation right now.
Bro, thank you so much for today and sharing your heart with us and joining me in this process. And I would love to do a part 2. Let's get back together and talk policies in detail and see what we can come up with.
Man, I love that.
All right.
Love hanging out with you, bro.
All right, man. Love you. Mean it.
Yep.
Be good. Thank you. See ya.